you have this mind where he's just like, all like he's throwing 86, throws an 84 slider, and like but he's just always seemed like he's one step ahead of what they're thinking.
Kershaw.
Kirsch. And then being able to relate that to, some of our younger guys, how to get steal strikes, how to like weigh like the length of innings going out for the next inning, how to steal like an early strike off a guy, knowing when guys are never going to swing, and it's like making sure these young guys, like we say it in meetings, about whether guys are, aggressive or passive, or they're looking for this or looking for that. But then he's in like real time, just like calling out pitches. And the only other guy, that I've been around who did that was Maddox, literally could tell you what you need to do, and you didn't even know what you needed to do. And so watching him impart that knowledge onto these guys was immense for like Emmett Sheehan and
Yeah.
Robleski and stuff like that.
A lasting image. Like when I see your team playing, they cut to the dugout, and you're always talking, as any good pitching coach does, sitting down with your current pitcher in the game and or the catcher, and talking about the next. Well, presumably you're talking about the next three hitters that are coming up, and some sort of like a refresher of the game plan. And you pitched, I pitched. We knew game plans, and then you'd get out on the mound, and then you'd forget the game plan.
Yeah. Right. Right.
So how much of that do you think, like, obviously we know what you're doing. It seems like, you're going over the next couple of hitters. Like, let's make sure he knows how to attack. And then you grab the catcher and you're like, okay, we're going to do the X, Y, and Z to this guy. And then the first pitch is a double off the wall and the game plan just gets blown up right in your face. So, like, what happens next? Like, how do you prepare for the unexpected for a pitcher, especially a young guy who's just like shell shocked, or like,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's involved, and this year was a big, I think, learning experience for myself. You take over, as a pitching coach, you kind of know like, okay, you can do some programming stuff, but you don't really know what it's like to, be in the dugout and try to talk to Kirsch or try to talk to, Bueller and stuff like that. And they're all different, right? Like some guys don't want to talk, but I think one thing that we always talked about from a game planning standpoint, and it evolves, and every year is different, and this year was very unique too. But I always try to remind guys like the pregame game plan is just a template. It's a roadmap, all right. But like, you know, if you type it into Google Maps or Apple Maps and you want to go north to LA, it's going to tell you something when you start. But if there's an accident or something happens or whatever, like it's going to update you on a new route, right? And I think that's how, like, I try to get guys, especially young guys, is like, yeah, we know this guy can't, hit sliders or whatever, and like that's where we want to get him out. But that's easy at 5 o'clock or 4:30 in the afternoon to say that. But you don't know their game plan. You don't know what your slider is. You don't know what the game situation calls for. And so we just got to make sure that we're willing to adjust and we're willing to adapt in the moment. And that's where I think like us in the dugout this year, we were much more interactive than I had been in the past, because I felt like, with some of our older guys, I like there was more of a trust. Like obviously Kershaw's been through, he's like the Tom Brady of baseball. It's like no situation is going to be like new to him or foreign to him. Like he's been in every situation, so he knows how to handle it. So you feel good about that. But like, the other guys, but it really evolved once, honestly, when Will Smith got hurt this year, and we were relying on two rookie catchers or
right.
backup catchers, and so you're really like all of a sudden, like now all of a sudden it's just like this perfect storm of like, okay, these guys don't even know our pitchers, let alone like our pitchers don't know them, and so a lot of it's just talking, like, okay, what are they showing us? What are they doing? Are they taking? Are they aggressive? How is your stuff? What do you feel about it? And I think it boils down to some things that we always talk about here, or that we try to preach, is like we want guys to be clear in message and have conviction and stuff. And it's like the clarity and conviction is like, okay, let's talk through it so that when you get out there for your first two or three batters, and that's mostly all we're really talking about, is that you feel convicted in what you're throwing. you feel convicted in like how I'm going to attack this guy now that knowing what you know in real time and you have more information than you did at 5 o'clock in a pregame meeting. And that's kind of where we're at. And we're talking with, the catchers. We're like, he'll be like, all right, I feel good about this. I don't feel great about this if we get to 2 strikes, et cetera. So we're trying to take all the real time information and now incorporate it into our game planning. And that's hard because there's things are moving around a mile a minute. You don't know how long you have. And a lot of that picked up too. Like Snell is a guy who always wants, he sits with his folder, he does his own scouting. And so he's talking through of how does he want to get guys out. And I think that's evolved from what I understand, a little bit of like him playing with Webb, last year in San Francisco, talking about trusting your stuff. I'm sure that was the same message that he was getting in San Diego from Ruben and Ben. Trust your stuff. And it's the same message I gave him is like attack these guys. Like let's try to get some quick outs. And so that's where he's trying to get to because again, he wants to know like I feel really good with this pitch or I don't feel great. And you get a sense of where guys are really at. So that's kind of where we're at, and that's what we're talking about. And I think it's something that I think is it extremely helped us, going through the playoffs and especially against the World Series because I think the Blue Jays had a very good plan of attack on how they wanted to go after our pitchers. And you're doing your best to just kind of play that chess match in real time.
Conviction and clarity of message.
Yeah, yeah. I want guys to be clear and convicted in what they're doing. And then obviously that takes on a myriad of
Sure.
forms and everything. But when guys are doubt, it's the old adage like, oh, I thought about this, but I didn't want to shake. That's usually when I'll lose my kind of my my thing where it's like I don't want to hear that after the fact.
Yeah.
Um, and then I mean, but on the flip side, you said like, what if I got doubles? And it's a little bit of now you have to be a little strategic on how you use your mound visits. And that's changed a little bit since I've started as a pitching coach. And you know, I'm not I'm not very aggressive with my mound visits. I've tried to be more aggressive at times, but then you're also like sometimes when you're aggressive and then you get into the sixth or seventh inning and you're like, all right, I got only one left, or then like an infielder goes and uses one, which is totally well, no, I mean, like our infielders ask, like, do you care? And I'm always like, I will never care if a player needs to go talk to a player. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because, like, I know how it impacted me. Like, when you have somebody coming and calming you down. And for gosh, like, sakes, like, you think I'm going to care if Freddie Freeman or Mookie Betts or Max Muncy or Will Smith goes talks to one of our players? Heck no. Like, that's going to calm somebody down or impact somebody way more than whatever I'm going to say when I get out there.
I mean, I used to think when the pitching coach came out, I was like, "Oh no, I'm in trouble," you know. But when the veteran third baseman comes over, it's like, "You got this." I was like, oh, "Okay." It's like your peers, you know. It's different
Right,
than
right. And we do that. I mean, we coach that way sometimes. I think that's a lesson I think I've picked up too. It's like, we
coach
always
through
talk
your other
about like,
players.
yeah, I mean, we always talk about like what's the best, how does somebody learn, right? Visually, they need to see it, they need to hear it, they need to do it, like whatever. Well, who do they listen to? Do they listen to me? Do they listen to the bullpen coach? Do they, they're not going to tell me certain things that they might tell the other pitching coach, just
Right.
from like, you know, whether they think it's a chain of command or whatever, and I'm cool with that. But ultimately, like, who are they best friends with?
Right.
Like, can we get a message through them that might land differently? Um, but I always think player to player sometimes can have the biggest impact on something. And so we do that at times. But yeah, I mean, and that's the other thing. It's like, one of the reasons we have all those conversations too is like, you know, you don't want to waste trips on pinch hitters all the time. So you try to be ahead of the game on those, late in games, if guys are coming off the bench, like let the catcher go and review it.
You make a
Uh,
lot of those, I feel like.
I do when they're unexpected or it's like crunch time. We're like, okay,
Right.
this is something we really got to make sure we're dialed up. Now, World Series playoffs, I didn't leave anything for chance. it was kind of like, talking with Doc. He's like, I'd rather run out than regret not making one, and I think it's probably like in those types of games. Game in June, you might you might roll the dice and say like, all right, let's see what they can do on, let's see, you might want that information too as a coach. How does this guy, react in this situation? Or how does, can they get by with just catcher pitcher?
Sounds like relationship building is a huge component of this pitching thing.
It always is.
Yeah.
And um I still use like, you made a comment to me one time when we were together, like, not everybody likes you. and and I
I
still
know I know
I
a lot of people
honestly
don't like me. It's okay.
right, but no, I
Yeah.
still remember that because I
Yeah.
felt like I know when we were young and we're like, oh, we hated, we didn't hate, but like I remember our old coaches when we started and blah blah blah. And we were trying to like kind of pave a new way, and obviously we had the freedom to do that. And even then, you don't get along with everybody.
Sure.
Um, and so it's all about building relationships, but not every relationship is going to be, buddy buddy or roses all the time. And again, I think that's where it goes back to like, well, then at least somebody has to have a relationship with him.
You and I have been banged up pretty hardcore later in our careers, and we understanding where like meeting the player where they're at, right? Like it's
Yeah.
being hurt sucks, but it doesn't define. I mean, it could be career defining both negatively, but also positively. And treating like those players like, hey, we've been there. I know what it's like to be hurt. I know what it's like to grind through arm care for 6 straight months without touching a ball. And like I thought that was something special that we had going on when we first started doing it. I thought that was awesome. Um, just like we had like that was sort of like this inherent like, hey, I got you. We've been there too, man. And then from there, we kind of cultivated this sort of like I hate the word culture. It's stupid, but you know what I'm kind of saying there.
Yeah. I
Culture.
mean, yeah. And there's, again, I think there's a tipping point too the other direction. Like you don't want to turn into coddling and binkies and stuff like that. Um,
Biggies.
yeah, because that creates you
Dependence.
want to have yeah, you want to have at least some individual accountability still, where and I think we have to. I think, and that's where again this comes back into the conversations where it's like, okay, game time is game time. If the lights are still on, we should be focused on game performance, not always like trying to, because this is another thing that's kind of come up in the last few years, and we say like the game is telling you what's going on. The game is telling you what we need to work on. The game is telling you what is working. You know, that's not always going to be on an iPad. That's not always going to be objective data that you can like pinpoint. What I think what turns into is with the next day, and this is the issue with like the difference between say probably like football and stuff, is they have 3 or 4 days where they can kind of like reflect and talk about it. Is like in baseball, it's like it's got to be very quick. So a lot of you're trying to get an understanding is like guy comes out of a game like we're focused as a team on how to win a ball game. All right, you got 3 outs. Might not have been pretty, might have been electric. Who knows? Let's focus on like what we did, like what's going on in the game, and then the next day, let's evaluate it. All right, okay, yeah, man, that wasn't like that's not where you want your slider, or that's not how we wanted to attack this guy. Let's have those conversations at 2, 3, 4 in the afternoon, and then again, lights go back on. Now let's redirect. Like, how are we going to get these guys out? And sometimes I think in PD, what we're finding is so much of that focus is, man, I threw really good sliders today. Man, that's the right shape. Yeah, it was the right shape. Like, great. Like, that's a positive. Like, but that positive is for the next day when when those 3 sliders that had the right shape or put off the wall, or, I'm bummed because like I didn't throw quality fastballs. I didn't have the right vert, but you're like, wait a minute, we got 3 outs here,
Right.
and so it's just like, for me it's a little bit of trying to weigh a little bit of those two different things. It's like, and that's the accountability. It's like, find a way to do your job in the moment, good, bad, or indifferent. There's no ugly wins. And so like, but we put it back together the next day. It's kind of joke around. It's like guy has a bad out. It's all right. Like, all right, next day, like let's put Humpty Dumpty back together. Like you're a really good pitcher. You're in the big leagues. Like you had a bad day. Those guys get paid extremely well on the other side to do what they do, and you're going to get beat some days. But one thing I've started to lean on too lately is like it's only a failure if you don't learn something from it. It's only like a bad if you don't learn anything from your experience in that day, then that's when it's a wasted moment or it's a wasted day or a bad outing. So if we don't learn from it, then all we're doing is just dwelling on the negative and we're not going to move forward. Put that on your
Denise,
shirt.
Denise put that on your poster and Denise, come say hello. No, I don't want to. She's listening to
Hello.
this whole thing.
All
Yeah.
right.
Mark says hello.
I haven't cussed. Only Jungle's cussed.
I only cussed like once. I've been cleaning it up lately.